Commander Zekthara stood on the bridge of his massive warship and looked out at the stars. His ship was called the Dominator's Edge, and it was the pride of the Valerian Empire. The bridge was dark except for the glow of many screens that showed data from across the galaxy. Zekthara was tall, like all Valerians, with gray, scaly skin and bright yellow eyes that missed nothing. He had been fighting wars for over 300 years and had never lost a single battle. The latest reports made him smile. Another world had fallen to his forces just yesterday. The alien species there had tried to resist, but their weapons were weak and their tactics were simple. It took only 6 hours to break their defenses and force them to surrender. Now they would serve the Empire like all the others he had conquered. "Commander, we have new orders from High Command," said his aide, Captain Veltar. The younger Valerian approached with a data pad in his clawed hands. Zekthara took the pad and read the message. His yellow eyes lit up with interest. The Empire's scout ships had found a new species on the edge of known space. They called themselves humans and lived on a small blue world they named Earth. The initial reports said they had only recently learned to travel between stars and their technology was basic. "Humans," Zekthara said the word slowly. "What do we know about them?" Veltar pulled up more data on his screen. "They are mammals, Commander. Soft skin, no natural weapons, and short lives of less than 100 years. Their ships are small and use simple energy sources. Intelligence says they have only been in space for a few decades." Zekthara nodded. This would be easy. Too easy, perhaps. He preferred enemies that could at least provide some challenge. The last 17 species he had conquered had all put up better fights than this promised to be. Far away in human space, Captain Jake Morrison sat in the command chair of his exploration ship, the New Frontier. The ship was small compared to military vessels, but it was fast and had good sensors. Jake and his crew had been mapping new star systems for Earth's colonial authority for 2 years now. "Captain, I'm picking up something strange on long-range sensors," said his science officer, Lieutenant Amy Carter. She was young and smart and had keen eyes for spotting unusual readings. Jake leaned forward in his chair. "What kind of strange?" "Large. Ship. Unknown design. It's much bigger than anything we've built. The energy readings are off the charts." Jake felt his stomach tighten. First contact with alien life was always dangerous. Earth had protocols for this, but they were mostly theoretical. No one really knew what to expect when meeting another species among the stars. "Red alert. All hands to stations," Jake ordered. The bridge lights dimmed, and warning sounds echoed through the ship. "Send a message to Earth Command. Tell them we've found something big." The alien ship was getting closer. On the main screen, Jake could see it was huge and covered in weapons. It looked like it was built for war, not exploration. The design was sleek but deadly, with sharp angles and dark metal that seemed to absorb light. Back on the Valerian ship, sensors detected the human vessel. Zekthara looked at the reading with mild curiosity. The human ship was tiny compared to his warship and seemed to be running basic scans. "Shall we destroy it, Commander?" asked Veltar. Zekthara thought for a moment. "No. Capture it if possible. I want to see what these humans are like before we begin the conquest. It might be interesting to study them." The Valerian ship moved closer and sent out capture beams, but Jake had no intention of being taken alive. He had read too many reports about what happened to species that were conquered by more advanced aliens. "All power to engines," Jake shouted. "Amy, send everything we've recorded to Earth. Use the emergency channel." The New Frontier tried to run, but the Valerian ship was faster. Jake made a desperate decision. He turned the ship around and aimed it straight at the alien vessel. "Captain, what are you doing?" Amy asked. "If we're going down, we're taking data about them with us," Jake said. He pushed the engines to maximum power. "Everyone hold on." Zekthara watched with surprise as the tiny human ship accelerated toward his vessel. Surely they didn't plan to ram a ship 100 times their size. It would be suicide, but that was exactly what Jake planned to do. At the last second, he activated the ship's self-destruct system. The New Frontier struck the Valerian ship's hull and exploded in a bright flash. The explosion barely damaged Zekthara's ship, but it surprised him. The humans had chosen death over capture. This was unusual behavior for a species facing their first contact with superior technology. Most aliens tried to surrender when they realized how outmatched they were. Interesting, Zekthara said, as his crew reported minimal damage. These humans destroyed themselves rather than be taken. Perhaps. They will be more entertaining than I thought. The data from the human ship had been transmitted just before its destruction. On Earth, Admiral Sam Rodriguez read the reports with growing concern. The alien ship was massive and clearly hostile. Worse, it had appeared in human space without any warning. "Get me the president," Rodriguez said to his aide, "and contact all fleet commanders. We need to prepare for the worst." Within hours, every human military base was on high alert. The small Earth fleet began moving toward the outer colonies where the alien contact had occurred, but everyone knew that if the aliens had ships that big, humanity was in serious trouble. Zekthara received his official orders from the Valerian High Command 3 days later. He was to take a small fleet to human space and begin the conquest. The Empire believed 12 ships would be more than enough to subdue this new species. As he prepared to leave, Zekthara felt a strange excitement he had not experienced in many years. Something about the humans intrigued him. Their willingness to die rather than surrender suggested they might actually put up a fight. It had been too long since he had faced an enemy with real spirit. He would soon learn that he had no idea what he was really facing. Zekthara's fleet arrived at the human colony world of New Haven 2 weeks after the first contact incident. His 12 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system and immediately began scanning for threats. The planet looked peaceful, with only 5 human ships in orbit around the small blue and green world. "Is this all they have?" asked Captain Veltar as he looked at the sensor readings. 5 ships to defend an entire world? Zekthara studied the data more carefully. The human ships were indeed small and seemed poorly armed. Their hulls looked like they were made from basic metals, and their energy signatures were weak. This would be even easier than he had expected. "Open a communication channel to the planet," Zekthara ordered. It was standard practice to offer surrender terms before beginning an attack. Most species accepted when they saw how hopeless their situation was. On New Haven, Colonel Lisa Kane sat in the command center deep underground. She was a tough woman with short brown hair and steel-gray eyes who had spent 20 years in the Earth military. When the alien ships appeared on the sensors, she knew this day would test everything she had learned about warfare. The alien message came through their communications system in perfect English. The translator technology was impressive, but the words were chilling. "Humans of New Haven, this is Commander Zekthara of the Valerian Empire. Your species has been selected for incorporation into our domain. Surrender now, and your people will be treated well as servants of the Empire. Resist, and you will be destroyed. You have 1 hour to decide." Lisa looked at her staff officers. Major Ben Cross was her fleet commander, a man who had never backed down from a fight in his life. Captain Karen Walsh commanded the ground forces and was known for her creative tactics. They all looked grim but determined. "What's our response, Colonel?" asked Ben. Lisa thought about Earth and the other human colonies. If they gave up without a fight, it would send a message that humans were weak. But if they fought, most of them would probably die. "Send this message back," Lisa said. "Come and take it." When Zekthara received the response, he was not surprised. The humans had already shown they preferred death to surrender. Very well, he would give them what they wanted. Begin. The attack. Standard formation. Destroy their ships first, then begin orbital bombardment of military targets. Zekthara commanded. The Valerian fleet moved forward in perfect formation. Each ship knew exactly where to go and what to do. This was how the Empire had conquered. 17 different species. Overwhelming firepower applied with precise tactics. The human ships moved to meet them. Ben Cross commanded the lead vessel, a converted cargo hauler that had been fitted with weapons. It was not much compared to a real warship, but it was what they had. All ships, remember the plan, Ben said over the communication system. We can't match their firepower, but we can make them pay for every inch. The first exchange of fire went exactly as Zekthara expected. Valerian energy beams cut through human shields like paper and destroyed 2 ships in seconds. The humans returned fire, but their weapons barely scratched Valerian armor. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of retreating or trying to fight at long range, the remaining human ships accelerated straight toward the Valerian fleet. "What are they doing?" Veltar asked. Ben Cross had learned from the first contact incident. If human ships were going to be destroyed anyway, they might as well take some aliens with them. His ship was badly damaged and losing power, but he kept pushing forward. "This is for Jake Morrison," Ben said as he aimed his ship at the nearest Valerian cruiser. At the last second, he triggered every explosive device on his ship. The blast destroyed Ben's ship completely, but also tore a hole in the Valerian cruiser's hull. Atmosphere and debris shot out into space as the alien ship lost pressure in 3 decks. Zekthara watched in shock as another human ship did the same thing to one of his destroyers. These humans were using their own vessels as guided missiles. It was crude, but terrifyingly effective. "Evasive maneuvers," he ordered. "Don't let them get close." But the humans had already changed their tactics. The last ship, commanded by Captain Amy Price, was not trying to ram anyone. Instead, she was using hit-and-run attacks to distract the Valerian fleet while ground-based weapons on the planet opened fire. Karen Walsh had prepared New Haven's defenses well. Hidden missile sites across the planet launched everything they had at the Valerian ships. The missiles were primitive compared to Valerian technology, but there were hundreds of them. "Point defense systems. Engage all incoming projectiles," Zekthara ordered. The Valerian ships shot down most of the missiles, but some got through. Explosions bloomed across their hulls as human weapons found their targets. The damage was light, but it was still damage. No species had managed to hurt Valerian ships in their first battle before. On the ground, Karen had more surprises waiting. When Valerian dropships began landing troops, they found that the humans had turned the entire colony into a weapon. Buildings had been rigged with explosives, and every street corner was a potential ambush site. The Valerian soldiers were well-trained and had better equipment, but they were used to fighting enemies who followed predictable patterns. The humans seemed to have no patterns at all. They would attack from unexpected directions, use improvised weapons, and fight to the death rather than retreat when their positions were overrun. Sergeant Mike Torres led a squad of human soldiers. In an attack on a Valerian command post, they had no chance of winning a direct fight, so they tunneled underneath the building and collapsed it on top of the aliens inside. "These humans fight like madmen," reported the Valerian ground commander to Zekthara. "They use their own wounded as bait to draw us into traps. They hide explosives in their own bodies and detonate them when we try to capture prisoners." Zekthara had never heard reports like this from any battlefield. Every other species he had conquered had tried to minimize casualties and preserve their civilization. The humans seemed willing to destroy everything rather than let it fall into Valerian hands. The battle raged for 18 hours. In the end, the Valerians won because they had superior numbers and technology. But the cost was terrible. 3 Valerian ships were destroyed, and 5 more were badly damaged. Ground casualties were the highest in any first contact war in Valerian history. As Zekthara looked at the reports, he felt something he had not experienced in centuries: uncertainty. The humans had lost the battle, but they had made the Valerians pay a price that seemed impossible for such a primitive species. Shall we proceed to the next human world, Commander? Asked Veltar. Zekthara stared at the tactical display showing the damage to his fleet. Request reinforcements from High Command. Tell them the humans are not what they appear to be. But, Commander, we won the battle. Yes, Zekthara said slowly. But I'm beginning to think winning battles against humans might not be the same as winning the war. Deep in the ruins of New Haven, a few human survivors sent a message to Earth before the Valerians could stop them. The message was simple but important. The aliens could be hurt, and they did not like fighting enemies who refused to follow the rules of civilized warfare. Admiral Rodriguez received the message and began planning humanity's real response to the Valerian invasion. News of the costly victory at New Haven spread through both human and Valerian space like wildfire. The Valerian High Command was deeply concerned about the heavy losses suffered against what should have been an easy target. They authorized additional ships for Zekthara's fleet and sent stern messages about the need to complete the conquest quickly and efficiently. Admiral Sam Rodriguez read every report from New Haven 3 times. The survivors had transmitted detailed information about Valerian tactics, weapons, and ship designs before going silent. More importantly, they had proven that the aliens could be hurt and killed despite their superior technology. Rodriguez called a meeting of Earth's top military leaders. The conference room was filled with admirals, generals, and scientists who had been working around the clock since the first alien contact. The Valerians fight like a textbook, Rodriguez explained to the assembled group. They use overwhelming force in perfect formations with predictable timing. They expect their enemies to fight the same way. We're going to give them something they've never seen before. Engineer Lucy Park stood up from her seat at the back of the room. She was a small woman with bright eyes who had spent her career designing civilian spacecraft. Admiral, I've been studying the combat footage from New Haven. Their ships are built to fight other warships in open space. What if we don't give them that kind of fight? Dr. Alan Stone, Earth's leading expert on alien psychology, nodded in agreement. The reports suggest they're confused by unpredictable behavior. They seem to expect logical responses to tactical situations. Human creativity might be our greatest weapon. Rodriguez smiled grimly. Then we're going to be very creative. Lucy, I want you to start converting every civilian ship we have into something that can hurt the aliens. Alan, I need you to figure out how to get inside their heads. Everyone else, start throwing out every military manual you've ever read. We're going to write new rules. Across human space, the response was immediate and dramatic. Cargo ships were fitted with ramming spikes and explosive charges. Passenger liners became mobile missile platforms. Even small personal spacecraft were turned into guided bombs that could be piloted by volunteers on suicide missions. Captain Ryan Foster was one of the first pilots to volunteer for the new fighter program. The ships were barely more than engines with guns attached, designed to be fast and expendable rather than safe and reliable. Ryan had lost friends at New Haven and wanted revenge against the aliens. Commander Nancy Blake took charge of converting the industrial world of Forge Point into a fortress. If the Valerians wanted the planet's factories and shipyards, they would have to fight for every building and machine. Meanwhile, Zekthara received his reinforcements and prepared for the next phase of the campaign. His fleet now numbered 20 ships, the largest force he had ever commanded. The target was Forge Point, a world that produced most of the equipment for human space exploration. This time will be different, Zekthara told his staff officers. We know the humans prefer desperate tactics over logical ones. We will be ready for their ramming attacks and suicide charges. But when the Valerian fleet arrived at Forge Point, they found something completely unexpected. The system appeared to be empty except for a few asteroid mining stations. There were no defending ships and no obvious military installations. "Where are they?" asked Veltar as he studied the sensor readings. Zekthara was suspicious. The humans had fought to the death at New Haven. It made no sense for them to abandon such an important world without a battle. "Begin detailed scans of the entire system," he ordered. "Check every asteroid and space station. The humans are here somewhere." The Valerians were right to be cautious. Nancy Blake had spent weeks preparing Forge Point's defenses, but not in any way the aliens would expect. Instead of building obvious fortifications, she had turned the entire system into a trap. The asteroid mining stations were filled with explosives and remote-controlled thrusters. When the Valerian ships moved deeper into the system, the asteroids suddenly came to life and began accelerating toward them. "Evasive action!" Zekthara shouted as he watched hundreds of rocks flying toward his fleet. The asteroids were crude weapons, but they were big and moving fast. Valerian point defense systems shot down many of the incoming projectiles, but not all of them. Several asteroids struck Valerian ships with devastating impact. The aliens had been expecting missiles and energy beams, not flying mountains. While the fleet was distracted by the asteroid attack, Ryan Foster led his squadron of improvised fighters out of hiding behind the planet's moons. The small ships were almost invisible to Valerian sensors until they were close enough to attack. "Remember, we don't need to destroy them," Ryan told his pilots over the radio. "Just damage their engines and sensors. Make them blind and slow." The human fighters swarmed around the Valerian ships like angry insects. Their weapons were weak, but they aimed for specific targets rather than trying to break through heavy armor. Sensor arrays, communication dishes, and engine nozzles were all vulnerable to concentrated small arms fire. Zekthara found his flagship nearly blind and struggling to coordinate with the rest of the fleet. The humans were using tactics he had never encountered before. Instead of trying to destroy his ships outright, they were systematically degrading their capabilities. "Sir, we're receiving transmission from the planet," reported the communications officer. Nancy Blake appeared on the main screen, broadcasting from the surface of Forge Point. She was standing in what looked like a military command center surrounded by determined-looking human soldiers. "Commander Zekthara, welcome to Forge Point. I hope you're enjoying our hospitality so far. We have many more surprises waiting for you." Zekthara activated the return communication. "Human Commander, you cannot win this battle. Surrender now, and I will spare your civilians," Nancy laughed, which surprised the Valerian leader. "Commander, you still don't understand what you're fighting. We're not trying to win this battle the way you think of winning. We're trying to teach you that fighting humans is more trouble than it's worth." Before Zekthara could respond, new contacts appeared on his sensors. A fleet of human ships was approaching from the outer system, but these were not military vessels. They were converted civilian craft of every type imaginable, all heading straight for the Valerian fleet. Captain Todd Grant commanded the leading ship, a former luxury cruise liner that had been stripped down and packed with explosives. Behind him came cargo haulers, mining ships, and even a few small personal yachts. None of them were proper warships, but all of them were ready to fight. "This is insane," Veltar whispered as he watched the approaching human fleet. "They're using passenger ships as weapons." Zekthara realized he was facing something unprecedented in Valerian military history. The humans were not fighting to win territory or resources. They were fighting to prove that conquering them would cost more than leaving them alone. The battle that followed was unlike anything in Zekthara's experience. Human ships would ram his vessels, explode in spectacular fashion, and somehow still managed to cause significant damage. The converted civilian craft were unpredictable and seemed to have no consistent tactical doctrine. Ryan Foster's fighters continued to harass the Valerian fleet, forcing them to waste ammunition on small targets, while larger threats approached. Nancy Blake's ground defenses turned the planet itself into a weapon, launching everything from industrial equipment to office furniture at the alien ships. By the time the battle ended, Zekthara had technically won again. The human fleet was destroyed and Forge Point was under Valerian control, but his own fleet was badly mauled with 8 ships destroyed or crippled. More importantly, his crews were demoralized and confused. "Request immediate consultation with High Command," Zekthara told his communications officer. Tell them we need to reconsider our approach to this species." As he looked at the wreckage floating in space around Forge Point, Zekathara began to understand that he was not fighting a normal war. The humans were changing the rules of engagement with every battle, and he was not sure how to adapt to an enemy that seemed to have no limits on what they were willing to sacrifice. The Valerian High Command was growing impatient with Zekthara's costly victories. Reports of heavy losses against a primitive species were causing concern among the Empire's leadership. They decided to assign additional commanders to share the burden of the human conquest, believing that fresh tactical minds would solve the problem quickly. Commander Thylek and Admiral Mordain arrived with their own fleets, each convinced they could succeed where Zekthara had struggled. The three Valerian leaders met aboard Zekthara's flagship to plan their coordinated assault on the human stronghold of Liberty Station. "The problem is clear," announced Thylek, a younger commander eager to prove himself. "You have been too cautious, Zekthara. Overwhelming force applied quickly will crush human resistance before they can adapt." Admiral Mordain, the most senior of the three, studied the tactical reports with concern. "These humans seem to learn from each engagement. Their tactics evolve faster than any species we have encountered before. We must be prepared for anything." Zekthara nodded grimly. "That is exactly what makes them dangerous. They do not fight the way military science says they should. Every time we think we understand their methods, they change them." Meanwhile, humanity had indeed been learning and adapting. General Chris Murphy and Admiral Tracy Webb had spent months analyzing every scrap of data from the previous battles. They established a network of hidden bases throughout human space and created mobile fleets that could appear anywhere the Valerians attacked. The human defense strategy had evolved beyond simple desperation. They now fought as a unified species, with coordination that impressed even their own leaders. Captain Seth Collins commanded the main defense fleet, while Captain Amy Price led smaller strike forces designed to hit Valerian supply lines. Liberty Station was humanity's most important military base, a massive space platform that served as the command center for all human forces. It was heavily defended and strategically positioned to control access to Earth and the core human worlds. When the combined Valerian fleet of over 60 ships arrived at Liberty Station, they expected to find a fortress waiting for them. Instead, they discovered something that confused all three commanders. The station appeared to be lightly defended with only a dozen human ships in the immediate area. "It's obviously a trap," warned Mordain. "The humans have proven they prefer ambush tactics to direct confrontation." Thylek disagreed. "Perhaps they have finally realized the futility of resistance. A dozen ships cannot defend against 60. We should attack immediately before they can call for reinforcements." Zekthara studied the sensor readings carefully. Something felt wrong about the situation, but he could not identify what bothered him. The human ships were maintaining their distance and making no aggressive moves. What the Valerians did not know was that Seth Collins had prepared the most complex trap in human military history. Hidden throughout the system were hundreds of small ships, automated weapons platforms, and even modified asteroids equipped with engines and warheads. The humans had learned to use Valerian predictability against them. They fed false information through captured communication equipment, making the aliens think the main human fleet was days away from Liberty Station. In reality, every human ship in the sector was already in position and waiting. "Execute operation." "Swarm!" Collins commanded from his flagship. Suddenly, the space around Liberty Station came alive with activity. Human ships appeared from behind asteroids, emerged from the shadows of moons, and seemed to materialize out of empty space. The Valerian fleet found itself surrounded by enemies they had not detected, but this was not the chaotic ramming attacks the aliens had learned to expect. The humans had evolved their tactics again. Amy Price led coordinated strike forces that targeted specific Valerian ships with precision attacks. Instead of trying to destroy the larger vessels, they focused on disabling their weapons and engines. How did they hide so many ships? Thylek demanded, as his sensors showed human contacts appearing from every direction. The answer was simple but devastating to Valerian tactical doctrine. The humans had learned to think of space as a three-dimensional battlefield rather than the flat plane the Valerians preferred. They used the full depth of the solar system to position their forces in places the aliens never thought to look. Captain Helen Brooke commanded a squadron of ships that had been hiding in the outer system for weeks. They approached the Valerian fleet from above and below the plane of battle, angles that Valerian formations were not designed to defend against. The battle became a masterclass in human tactical evolution. They had learned to exploit every weakness in Valerian strategy while using their own creativity to counter alien advantages. Where the Valerians used precise formations, humans used chaos. Where aliens relied on overwhelming firepower, humans used speed and misdirection. Zekthara watched his carefully planned attack dissolve into confusion as human forces struck from unexpected directions. His own ship was taking damage from multiple small vessels that seemed to appear and disappear at will. "All ships, maintain formation," he ordered. But the command was useless. The Valerian fleet was designed to fight in organized lines against similar enemies. The human swarm tactics made formation fighting impossible. Thylek's flagship was the first to fall. A coordinated attack by 6 human ships overwhelmed its defenses and left it drifting helplessly in space. The young commander was forced to abandon ship as his vessel's power systems failed. Mordain tried to adapt by splitting his forces into smaller groups, but the humans had anticipated this response. Amy Price's strike forces had been specifically designed to handle divided Valerian formations. They concentrated their attacks on isolated ships and destroyed them before moving to the next target. "We need to retreat," Mordain told Zekthara over the communication system. "This battle is lost," but retreat proved as difficult as attack. The humans had positioned ships to block the most obvious escape routes. Any Valerian vessel that tried to leave the battle was immediately swarmed by human fighters. Ryan Foster, now promoted to squadron leader, led his pilots in attacks on Valerian engines. The goal was not to destroy the alien ships, but to trap them in the system where they could be dealt with at leisure. "Cut their engines, not their hulls," Foster told his pilots. "A crippled ship is more valuable than a destroyed one." The humans had learned an important lesson about psychological warfare. Destroying Valerian ships was impressive, but capturing them alive sent a more powerful message to the Empire about human capabilities. By the end of the battle, the Valerian fleet was shattered. 20 ships were destroyed, 15 were captured, and the rest limped away badly damaged. For the first time in his career, Zekthara faced complete tactical defeat. As he stood on the bridge of his crippled flagship, Zekthara finally understood what made humans so dangerous. They did not just fight to win battles, they fought to change the nature of warfare itself. Every engagement taught them something new about their enemies and themselves. "Request immediate communication with High Command," Zekthara told his surviving crew. "Tell them we need to negotiate with the humans." The message that reached the Valerian homeworld was shocking. For the first time in the Empire's history, one of their fleets had been decisively defeated by a supposedly primitive species. The humans had proven they could not only resist Valerian conquest, but could actually defeat them in open battle. Admiral Tracy Webb received Zekthara's request for negotiations from Liberty Station. The human command staff gathered to discuss their response to this unprecedented opportunity. "They want to talk," Webb told the assembled officers. "The question is, are we ready to listen?" The defeat at Liberty Station sent shockwaves through the Valerian Empire. For 300 years, no species had managed to defeat a major Valerian fleet in open battle. The High Command faced the unthinkable reality that their conquest of humanity had not only stalled but reversed into a humiliating defeat. Zekathara sat in his damaged quarters aboard what remained of his flagship and wrote his final report on the human war. His yellow eyes were tired, and his scaled hands moved slowly across the datapad. Everything he had believed about warfare had been challenged by these strange mammals who refused to fight by any known rules. The Valyrian High Command had already stripped him of most of his authority, but they still needed his expertise to understand what had gone wrong. Other commanders who had fought humans reported similar experiences: victories that cost more than defeats, enemies who grew stronger with each battle, and tactics that defied all military logic. On the human side, the victory at Liberty Station had proved that they could not only resist the Valyrian Empire, but actually defeat it. Captain Todd Grant and Commander Helen Brooke led the human forces in a series of lightning strikes against Valyrian supply bases and communication stations. They no longer fought like a desperate species trying to survive, but like apex predators who had learned to hunt their former hunters. Admiral Dan Mitchell had taken overall command of human forces and was coordinating with General Katie Shaw to plan the next phase of operations. The humans had evolved from reactive defense to active offense in just a few months of warfare. The Valyrians are requesting formal negotiations, Mitchell told the assembled human leadership. Commander Zekathara wants to meet in neutral space to discuss terms. General Shaw studied the tactical displays showing Valyrian fleet movements. It could be a trap. They might be trying to buy time to bring in reinforcements. Dr. Alan Stone, who had spent the war studying Valyrian psychology, shook his head. I don't think so. Their communication patterns suggest genuine distress. They're not used to facing enemies they can't understand or predict. Mitchell made the decision to accept the negotiations. We'll meet with them, but on our terms. If they want to talk, they can come to us. 3 days later, Zekathara's shuttle approached the human command ship in the neutral zone between the two fleets. The Valyrian commander had requested permission to come alone, which surprised the humans. In their experience, aliens usually traveled with large entourages to demonstrate their importance. Admiral Mitchell and General Shaw waited in the main conference room as Zekathara was escorted aboard. The Valyrian commander was tall and imposing, but his manner seemed different from what the humans expected. There was no arrogance or superiority in his bearing, only a kind of professional respect. Admiral Mitchell, General Shaw, Zekathara said in heavily accented but clear English. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I believe we have much to discuss. Mitchell gestured to a chair that had been specially constructed for Valyrian anatomy. Commander Zekathara, before we begin, I have to ask, why did your people attack us? Zekathara settled into the chair and considered his answer carefully. Because that is what we do, Admiral. The Valyrian Empire has conquered 17 species across this galaxy. When we discovered humanity, we assumed you would be the 18th. We were wrong. What makes you think we're different? Asked Shaw. The Valyrian commander's yellow eyes seemed to look through the humans to something beyond their understanding. Every species we have conquered fought to preserve their civilization, their culture, their lives. You fight to preserve your right to choose how you die. That changes everything. Mitchell leaned forward in his chair. Explain. Most species try to minimize casualties when facing superior force. They surrender to save lives and hope to preserve something of their culture under our rule. Humans do the opposite. You maximize casualties, especially your own, to make conquest too expensive to continue. You turned weakness into strength by refusing to acknowledge that you were weak. Shaw nodded slowly. And that bothers you. It terrifies us, Zekathara admitted. We understand enemies who want to live. We do not understand enemies who want to win more than they want to survive. Your tactics evolve faster than we can adapt because you treat each battle as a learning experience rather than a test of strength. The conversation continued for hours as both sides began to understand each other for the first time. The humans learned that the Valerian Empire was not inherently evil, but simply used conquest as a method of bringing order to the galaxy. The Valerians learned that humans valued freedom more than safety and would fight anyone who tried to take it away. "What do you propose?" Mitchell finally asked. Zekthara pulled out a data pad and placed it on the table. "A formal treaty recognizing human independence and territorial sovereignty. The Empire will withdraw from all human space and establish your species as an autonomous power." Shaw looked skeptical. "And in return, you stop teaching other species how to fight us," Zekthara said with something that might have been humor. "3 of our former subject races have already begun copying human tactics. The Empire is facing rebellions on multiple fronts for the first time in our history." Mitchell and Shaw exchanged glances. The humans had not considered that their methods might spread to other species, but it made sense. If humans could defeat the Valerians, others would want to learn how. "We'll need guarantees," Mitchell said. "Not just for Earth, but for all human colonies and any humans who want to travel in your space." "Agreed. We will also establish trade relations and exchange scientific information. Your species has developed technologies we had not considered. Perhaps we can learn from each other without the need for warfare." General Shaw stood up and walked to the view screen showing the 2 fleets facing each other in space. "You realize this sets a precedent. Other species are going to hear about this treaty. They'll know that the mighty Valerian Empire can be negotiated with instead of just conquered by." Zekthara nodded slowly. "Yes. The Empire as it existed for 3 centuries ended when your Captain Morrison rammed our scout ship rather than surrender. We are still learning what it will become." The formal treaty negotiations took another week, but the framework was established in that first meeting. Both sides recognized that continuing the war would benefit no one. The Valerians had learned that humans were too dangerous to conquer, and the humans had learned that they could defend themselves against any threat. When the treaty was finally signed, Zekthara made one final observation to Admiral Mitchell. "In my 300 years of warfare, I conquered 17 different species. I learned their weaknesses, exploited their fears, and broke their resistance. But you humans taught me something I had never considered." "What's that?" Mitchell asked. "Sometimes the greatest victory comes not from defeating your enemy, but from earning their respect." As the Valerian fleet withdrew from human space, Zekthara sat in his quarters and completed his personal log. The entry would become required reading at the Valerian War College for generations to come. "I thought I knew battle," he wrote. "I thought I understood war. Then the humans came, and I learned that sometimes the most dangerous enemy is not the one with the biggest weapons, but the one who refuses to fight the way you expect. The humans did not win because they were stronger than us. They won because they were willing to change the rules of warfare itself rather than accept defeat. In the end, that made all the difference." The Human-Valerian War had lasted only 6 months, but it changed the galaxy forever. Other species began to resist Valerian conquest using tactics learned from human example. The Empire was forced to become a confederation of allied worlds rather than conquered territories. And somewhere in space, human ships continued to explore and expand, carrying with them the knowledge that sometimes the smallest species can teach. The mightiest empires that there are things more important than power, courage, creativity, and the refusal to give up hope even when facing impossible odds.